If you have ever promised yourself that tonight would be different, that tonight you would not scroll, not snack, not play one more game, not watch one more episode, and then somehow found yourself doing exactly that anyway, this video is for you. Because the problem might not be your discipline. It might not be laziness. It might not even be motivation. The real problem could be that you are fighting your brain in the most exhausting way possible. Most people believe self-control works like a moral test. You either have it or you do not. Strong people resist temptation. Weak people give in. But what if that entire idea is wrong? What if the people who appear disciplined are not resisting anything at all? What if the reason you feel drained, distracted, and constantly fighting yourself is because you are relying on willpower when you were never meant to? A few days ago, I spent $60 on a plastic box that locks itself. You put something inside, set a timer, and the box will not open again until the timer expires. I bought it for one reason only: to stop myself from playing video games while I was supposed to be working. When I showed it to my girlfriend, she looked genuinely concerned and asked a very reasonable question. Why not just resist the temptation? That question sounds simple, but it exposes something much deeper. What is the difference between resisting a temptation and not having the temptation in the first place? Because those two states feel completely different in your brain. When you resist something, your attention is still wrapped around it. You are thinking about it, negotiating with yourself, bargaining, feeling the pull. But when the temptation does not exist at all, your mind is quiet. There is nothing to fight. This distinction turns out to be one of the most important ideas in behavioral psychology. Decades ago, researchers ran an experiment that became famous around the world. Children were seated alone in a room with a marshmallow placed in front of them. They were told that if they waited until the researcher returned, they would receive a second marshmallow. If they ate it early, they would get nothing more. The room was silent. The marshmallow sat inches from their face. Hidden cameras recorded what happened next. Some children stared at it intensely, some touched it, some smelled it, some licked it, and about 2/3 of them eventually gave in. But the fascinating part was not who failed, it was how the successful kids succeeded. They did not sit there heroically staring temptation in the eye. They turned away, they covered their eyes, they sang songs, they kicked their feet. They distracted themselves until the marshmallow almost stopped existing. They did not win through stronger willpower. They won by removing the temptation from attention. That difference matters more than almost anything else when it comes to productivity, habits, focus, and discipline. For a long time, psychologists believed that willpower functioned like a muscle. Use it too much, and it becomes fatigued. This idea was supported by many experiments. In one famous study, participants entered a room filled with the smell of freshly baked cookies. Some were allowed to eat them. Others were forced to eat radishes instead, while the cookies sat inches away. Afterward, everyone was asked to solve a difficult puzzle that was secretly impossible. The people who had resisted the cookies gave up far sooner than those who had eaten them. The conclusion seemed obvious. Resisting temptation drained mental energy. Later research complicated the picture, with debates about how ego depletion works and when it appears. But regardless of the technical details, something important remained consistent across studies. Temptation itself is cognitively expensive. Even when you do not give in, your brain is paying a price. Modern research shows that simply being tempted occupies mental bandwidth. When your attention is split between what you are doing and what you want to be doing, your performance suffers. In one study, participants who merely had unread emails waiting in their inbox performed significantly worse on cognitive tasks. Their IQ scores dropped by roughly 10 points. They were not checking email. They were not distracted by notifications. They were only aware that something tempting was waiting. That awareness alone was enough to reduce brain power. This explains why days feel exhausting even when you haven't done much physical work. From the moment you wake up, you are resisting constantly. You resist checking your phone. You resist staying in bed. You resist skipping meetings. You resist procrastination. You resist distractions. You resist cravings. You resist entertainment. You resist rest. By the time evening arrives, you are mentally depleted, not because you lack discipline, but because you have been fighting yourself non-stop. And here is where things get interesting. Researchers tracked hundreds of adults throughout their daily lives using random prompts. Participants were asked whether they were experiencing a desire, whether they were resisting it, and whether they succeeded. When scientists analyzed thousands of these reports, they found something surprising. The more desire someone resisted, the more likely they were to give in later. But the most shocking discovery was this: the people who scored highest in self-control did not resist more temptations. They experienced fewer temptations altogether. In other words, disciplined people were not stronger fighters. They were better designers of their environment. They structured their lives so temptations rarely appeared in the first place. This completely flips the common narrative of discipline. The goal is not to become someone who can stare at the marshmallow forever. The goal is to live in a world where the marshmallow is not constantly on the table. This idea becomes even clearer when you look at habits. Every habit follows a loop. Something triggers it. That trigger creates a craving. You respond to the craving. You receive a reward. Over time, your brain learns the pattern. Most people try to break bad habits by attacking the response. They attempt to use willpower to stop themselves in the moment. But that is the most fragile point in the entire cycle. By the time you are resisting, the habit is already active. The craving has already arrived. The more effective strategy is to weaken the cue. If boredom triggers scrolling, eliminate idle phone access. If stress triggers junk food, remove junk food from your environment. If fatigue triggers gaming, store consoles out of reach or out of sight. When the cue disappears, the craving weakens. When the craving weakens, the response often never occurs. This is why environment design consistently outperforms motivation. It is also why people often fail when they rely purely on internal discipline. You are asking your brain to fight an uphill battle all day long. Consider two people trying to eat healthier. One keeps snacks in the pantry and relies on restraint. The other never buys them. The second person rarely needs discipline at all. The same logic applies to alcohol, social media, gaming, procrastination, late nights, and distraction. If an option exists, your brain evaluates it. If your brain evaluates it, your focus drops. If your focus drops, your performance suffers. This constant evaluation creates mental noise. Should I work or relax? Should I reply now or later? Should I start or wait? Should I stop or continue? Every open choice consumes attention. This is why having fewer options often increases clarity and calm. When something is impossible, your brain stops negotiating. When something is unavailable, the argument ends. This is exactly why tools that restrict access feel strangely relieving. Not because they make you stronger, but because they make decisions disappear. When you remove the option, you remove the internal debate. And without debate, your mind becomes quiet. This explains why locking distractions away can feel less stressful than resisting them. The effort vanishes. The background anxiety fades. Focus becomes easier, not because you are trying harder, but because you are no longer fighting. This is also why successful people often appear extreme. They throw away temptations rather than manage them. They simplify instead of optimize. They choose routines over constant freedom. From the outside, it looks rigid. From the inside, it feels peaceful. The modern world is not designed for self-control. It is designed for temptation. Infinite content, infinite choices, infinite stimulation. Expecting raw willpower to compete with systems engineered to hijack attention is unrealistic. It means discipline should be used strategically. Willpower is best spent once, ahead of time, rather than hundreds of times throughout the day. Decide once to uninstall. Decide once to block. Decide once to remove. Decide once to automate. Then let the system carry the load. The people who achieve the most are rarely those who force themselves moment by moment. They are the ones who build lives where the right action becomes the default. The marshmallow is not on the desk. The game console is not in the room. The notification does not arrive. The choice never appears. And because it never appears, there is nothing to resist. This is the quiet secret behind real self-control. It is not about strength. It is about design. If you feel exhausted from trying to be disciplined, the solution may not be more effort. It may be fewer temptations, less friction for the behaviors you want, More friction for the behaviors you do not. Because the goal is not to fight your brain. The goal is to stop putting it in situations where it has to fight at all. Use less willpower, not more. And when you do, focus stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like clarity.